gizmo. So, how much, no, how about who owns U.S. debt? All right. If you go to the site, you can get this type of information. This one's from a popular media source. That didn't really blow it up very much, did it? So, 16 trillion, but that number's a little bit loaded because part of that debt is government owing the other side of the government, the left arm of the government owing the other arm of the government, so intra-governmental debt. Some of it we owe to our own citizens, which isn't too bad in one way. At least, you know, if the government's in debt but they owe it to us as they pay back the debt, kind of stays in our system. And so probably one of the more troubling parts of our debt, and let's not forget the Federal Reserve, they've got 12% of the debt. So that is the way they help control the money supply by buying and selling some of that debt. And then China at 8%, Japan at 7%, and then other foreign countries at 9%. So we got this other little troubling part of the debt that represents about 30%. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, which we've used in some other classes, good old Fred here. If you go into Fred and do national debt, so we got a number of different variables. If you guys see any alike, I want to show you one first. Is percent of the debt by foreigners. Here we go. Federal debt held by foreign and international investors. So this is the one that starts to make you wonder a little bit, although maybe it's not too big of a deal either in some respects. But we've got this approaching $6 trillion of that amount. So that's how much is owned by the foreigners. And of that 6 trillion, China and Japan are the largest holders of some of that. But you can see the trend. We used to be down here. A large part of the debt was up here. We can show this as a fraction of GNP. I think they had that down here. You see it, tell me, it's like the foreigners as a fraction of GDP. Was it back up? I almost thought I saw it. Well, here, let's just do this one first. Here is the federal debt as a percent of gross domestic product. So we've been in a similar state before. 19, what was happening back here?
Great Depression.
It's ahead of the Great Depression. That's back here.
First World War.
Yeah, Second World War, right? So 1942, we had a little Hitler action, and we ended up going in debt. But look at where it came back down to. And then this is where we're at today. So we're approaching 100% of GDP.
Wow.
So if we make $15 trillion a year and our debt's $15 trillion, that's about 100%, right? So that's the math of where the debt's at. I'd like to find that other series. If I don't find it, there's Italy, but I saw Italy and Japan.
You can hit Control F and search for it.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be too bad. Except I'm not sure what to call it. Here we go. This is it. So again, we've got foreign debt higher than any levels we saw before. So 5%, 20%. So even just within the last few years, we're up to peaking here close to 35%. so those are some issues. It's kind of high. The question is, do we care? It also brings up some interesting issues if what happens with appreciation or depreciation, which is some material we'll get into later. So if we pursue inflationary policies and the dollar depreciates or appreciates, how does that affect the holdings of foreigners? Does that make them better off or worse off?
So we could like devalue our currency so we could pay back less, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we can do. We kind of hold the cards a little bit. So sometimes people get worked up about it, and we kind of hold a few more cards than people think. And I think that's a little bit of what the Federal Reserve's been up to. All right. What am I trying to find here? There it is. Let me do this quick little aside. This is something some of you have seen, but it's a good refresher. You might remember this. So, to consume or not to consume, what's the difference as far as what happens to our money in the system and why that investment category is important? So, if we take $100 worth of income, we put 10% away, and we consume 90% of it, we've got that pizza heading off to Pizza Village at pizza time, right? And then it stays in the system. So we spent $90 and it went through the goods market. And if we save it, we've got $10 that then takes a jump through the financial system. And here's the difference, is that when it comes up here and we have higher proportions of savings, of long-term savings, financial institutions take that in and ultimately create loans to our primary borrower, who is businesses that are trying to expand their business, right? So instead of turning into a pizza, it turns into a tractor. And that's the importance of that. From dollars spent on day one, there's no change. We either spent our money at John Deere or we spent our money at pizza time. John Deere takes the money, pays their employees, pays their suppliers, pays everybody, and $100 enters the system and gets spread around. We spend our $100 at Pizza Time or Pizza Village. They pay their employees, the pizza dough, the crust, everything, and that money enters the system and it spreads around. So in terms of a slice in time of today, what happened, it really doesn't matter in terms of GDP. So our income would ultimately be the same. But tomorrow's where the difference is. We have a pizza that's turned into poop, and we have a tractor that's still a tractor today, right? How many of you have seen 30-year-old tractors out in the field somewhere? 60-year-old tractors out in the field somewhere, right? Tractors have this duration, and as well as other capital goods, buildings, tools, machines, computers. You go down the list of the investment in the capital bucket here, those are things that persist. And so by taking more of our money and investing it into those sorts of activities leads to greater economic growth tomorrow. So that's the accumulation of physical capital that's important there. All right, I think I'll skip this one. Questions there at all?
Are these all yours? Like, did you create these or these in the book?
No, this is something I did. This is the part I wanted to get to. I didn't create these numbers, but this was 2007 or 2011 deficit figures on what we have. So this is the T and the G, right? So the receipts were the tax receipts: personal income taxes, Social Security, corporate income taxes. Do you guys remember which one's bigger here? What the corporations pay or what citizens pay? Citizens? Those big nasty corporations, don't they pay most of the taxes in the United States?
Isn't it progressive?
It is, so the rich pay proportionately more. But yeah, the personal income taxes is the biggest part. But that's what Social Security taxes are too. So you really lump those two things together. And this is the tax burden on the households. So the corporate tax has the double taxation thing going. We hit the corporation with the tax, we distribute it to the shareholders. The person who owns the corporation gets hit with the tax again. So there's kind of a double dip there. On this side of life, transfer payments are the big deal and growing. So that's where our G is going out, government spending, leaving us with a $1.3 trillion deficit this year that then causes the debt to go up or down. Up. So the deficit is each year the misses that we have, and then we've got the debt. So back in 2011, there was our debt number. And the number that's hard to get out of the internet is the amount held by foreigners. And I actually tried to go in and update it, but I couldn't quite find it. But I did find that the amount was about right. So there's the debt held by the government. What is that amount held by foreigners? So of that 6 million, and these percentages are approximately right, at least ballpark, from the Fred data that we just looked at, the $6 trillion worth of the national debt, 25% is owned by China. So China really does own a large fraction of our outstanding debt. Here's Japan. Remember, they were in that other pie graph, the other big players. So between China and Japan, they've got big chunks. And then we're kind of spread all over the world. Everybody's got a little piece of the United States in terms of debt. Because it's a pretty good thing to hold as far as an asset goes, because we've been reliable at paying back. Never defaulted yet. Hopefully that'll continue. All right, questions or comments there? Got the general understanding? All right, there's our holder of our debts. Here's how it changes from year to year, which is kind of interesting too. So China holds a lot, but in terms of the buying and selling of new debt every year, that's all across the board here. The little players, the big players, kind of all over. Let's see, where's all your guys' countries here? We got Switzerland, it's down 3% here. What else we got?
Brazil's up 25.
Brazil, there's Brazil, 25. Germany's got 11. So it looks like we're all buyers here of the countries we've so far. All right. So, does the size of the debt matter? There's that big number again. What's this big number? What's that? GDP, right? So that's our income for the nation, our total amount of spending. There's our deficit this year, $1.3 trillion worth of deficit. And to make the numbers a little easier, let's wipe out the zeros. And think about the story a little bit differently. If you are a young couple making $145 grand a year, and you've got $97,000 worth of debt, and you went further into debt this year for $13,000, are you completely out of the ordinary, definitely going to be bankrupt in a year? No. No, right? In fact, there's a lot of people that are in worse shape than that. Now, that's a little bit of a hard thing to do. We're talking about the government and the owners, you know, so it's a little bit hand-wavy, but at least it starts to put things into perspective compared to the big, long numbers of billions and trillions. We can start to see things scale down. And so I've always been one to argue that, no, that doesn't really matter. It's not catastrophic today, tomorrow, or whatever. But over the long haul, it does matter. We can't persistently keep doing it. And I think that's the real problem with it. It becomes kind of the easy way out. The money gets spent on stuff that's maybe not very productive, right? Kind of wasted. Those are the really big problems with the deficits, and that's why a lot of countries today find themselves into some big trouble. It's not so much the level of the deficit or the debt, the amount, not so much that, but it's what did you actually spend it on? What did G go towards? Did G build a bridge, or did G was a gift to Ethiopia or something, right? The impacts of that are way different long term. The bridge, the road, the whatever, the infrastructure might help us make other stuff in the future similar to what the tractor does. Okay. Questions on that? Got a little video for us today. It's a fairly short one. Okay, let's see. Where did you go? Maybe I should order these better. Here it is, this one. 2 minutes, 32 seconds.
Hey everyone, this is Harry for the World by 10 channel. I want to show you some shocking slides here, just how bad it is, not only for us, for the world. These are the world's largest debtor nations compared to, and they're going to show how much debt that they have compared to their GDP. And number 15, let's see who's on the bottom of the list. Surprise, surprise, United States. We're here, shows we're 95% of our GDP, which is $14 trillion in debt. So even though we have it bad, other people have it much worse, and I'm concerned about this, and I'm going to go into this in another video because, as I mentioned before, there's going to be some triggering events that could be a triggering event that could start the currency crisis. And like here, Germany, they're at 137% of their GDP is debt, and most likely one of these European countries is going to be the one to fall and cause their currency crisis. And again, to talk about this, Austria is at 191% of their debt. Switzerland at 264%. Switzerland, can you believe that? Netherlands, 268% of their GDP. Hong Kong, the only Asian country here, with almost 300%.
300%.
And Belgium, 327%. Now, we have the United Kingdom at 336%, and as you remember, they were downgraded, and they are in trouble right now, and they're number 2. Now, let's see number 1. Ireland. This is not a typo. They're at 801% of their GDP. That's how much debt they have. This is an extremely large amount, and is a crushing amount of debt load that they're currently bearing. This may come to a head. They can't sustain these levels for long, so let's keep an eye out, and if this does happen to trigger their collapse of their financial system, it will send shockwaves and most likely very much disrupt European, if not collapse, the European economy. Stay tuned, I have some really great stuff coming up soon. Thank you.
All right. Questions or comments on that one? So when does it really a crisis then? So 811, 336, the United States is 100%. I mean, when is it truly crisis time? Think about T and G.
G is double your T.
Yes, and if G's double your T, what do you need to do?
Obviously, you need to raise your T.
Yeah.
Lower G and charge higher taxes.
Okay, yeah, so cut spending, get higher taxes, or borrow more for that year, right? Because that's how we fund it in the first place. If G If G is bigger than T, we got to borrow. But when does it really become a crisis? I mean, we just saw some numbers. Ireland hasn't, fallen apart yet, but when would it happen?
Whenever you can't get someone, or whenever no one will borrow to, or lend to you, excuse me.
Okay.
No one, and you can't raise taxes and you can't lower any government spending.
All right. So if we go back to this part, when does the crisis really kick in? If you can't get funds anymore, that takes away one thing you can do, right? So then you only have the other two options you just mentioned, which are what?
Cut G and
Cut G, increase T, right? So if we increase T, what happens to productivity and people's incentive to work? It goes down, right? So that's the problem with that. We cut government spending, and all the poor people, the unemployed, what are we going to do with them, right? All the transfer payments. So here's our G cutting. We got transfer payments, expenditure on goods and services, weapons of mass destruction. So we could cut the national defense budget, but then the terrorists come in, and so that's kind of a difficult one to balance. So with debt being 811%, what's this as a fraction of their spending?
probably
Something high, right? So this is the thing to kind of key in on, is what fraction of this is compared to the taxes? Because check it out, we're pulling in $2.8 trillion in taxes, right? We're paying out $360 billion, 0.3 in debt interest. But what if that debt interest actually climbed to $2 trillion? Think about the picture now, where we're collecting 2.8 trillion and tax rates are already kind of high, let's say, and the economy's a little sluggish, and the lenders have closed their door to us because we can't borrow anymore, and our debt is high. We might get to the point where we have to default. We have to have weapons of mass destruction at some minimal level, some sort of national security, let's say, we've determined, and there has to be some amount of transfer, otherwise we're going to have people starving if we instantaneously cut these programs, right? We can't just cut this to zero. And so as this starts to climb, the real crisis hits when you can't service the debt. You are bankrupt. That's true bankruptcy. When you can't make this payment, that's when you're bankrupt. And then the people who hold the debt, which is China, in the U.S.'s case, aren't too happy with you anymore, right? Now we might be talking World War III or something if we start to get down to that point. We're not there yet. We're a long ways out, but around the world, as you guys go through that last part of the chapter, that's the same situation. The framework's the same, right? Every country's doing the same thing. They're collecting some taxes somehow, they're spending that money, and as we saw in that video, and as you'll see, every country's got some debt out there. They're all doing it. Nobody's like really in the debt-free area, except like Saudi Arabia, because they got plenty of oil. They want to make some stuff, they just suck a little oil out of the ground and sell it. And they're your cash buyer out there. But for the most part, most countries have that debt. Okay. That is it. We'll see ya, I guess not till...
So studying old quizzes, homework problems.
Yes. Yep. And you can remember the study plan thing too with